Welcome to Compact Warfare from compactwarfare.com, the show where we explore key moments from the history of conflict, from ancient battlefields to modern warfare. This is episode 41, The Rise of the Samurai. The samurai emerged from the shifting political and economic landscape of the late Heian period in Japan, roughly the 9th to 12th centuries. Imperial power centered in Kyoto faced a persistent problem. The court owned vast landed estates but lacked the means to police distant provinces and protect revenues. Private estates, known as shogun, multiplied, many of which were exempt from direct taxation and administration, and their managers required armed protection. Local magnates began to recruit mounted warriors to defend shipments, enforce rights, and mediate disputes. These specialists in violence, first called bushi or mononofu, cultivated riding, archery, and the small unit tactics needed for skirmishes across rice fields, river crossings, and mountain roads. Their service began as an adjunct to aristocratic authority, yet it set the stage for a new kind of politics grounded in military power. As provincial conflicts intensified, warrior leaders consolidated retinues into enduring family organizations. These were not simply bloodlines, but networks of vassals tied by land grants and promises of protection. The court's own military institutions, such as the Kebishi police and ad hoc expeditionary forces, proved inadequate to keep order, which increased reliance on regional strongmen. In this environment, the Minamoto and Taira houses rose to prominence. Both claimed descent from imperial princes who had been established in the provinces generations earlier. Through successful service as provincial governors and estate managers, they accumulated land rights and followers. Warrior culture developed distinctive values, including personal bravery, loyalty to the household, and public reputation gained through single combat, the taking of heads as proof of victory, and formalized battle reports that circulated as court literature. The ethos was practical and social, not yet the philosophical code later associated with Bushido. Political crisis in Kyoto catalyzed the transformation of these houses into kingmakers. The Hogan disturbance in 1156 and the Heiji rebellion of 1159 pitted court factions against each other and brought Taira no Kiyomori to power. Kiyomori wielded influence at court while consolidating maritime trade and provincial revenues. His dominance bred resentment among rival elites and marginalized Minamoto leaders. When Prince Mochihito issued a call to arms in 1180, the conflict known as the Genpei War began. Over the course of 5 years, the Taira and Minamoto fought across rivers, mountain passes, and coastlines, drawing in provincial families that chose sides according to local interests and long-standing feuds. Famous encounters such as Ichi no Tani and Yashima showcased the mobility of mounted archers and the importance of supply lines by sea. The war ended in 1185 at Dan no Ura, where Minamoto naval forces used the tide and current to break the Taira fleet. With the Taira destroyed, Minamoto no Yoritomo stood as the preeminent military leader in Japan. Yoritomo did not abolish the imperial court. Instead, he built a parallel system to govern the provinces. From his power base at Kamakura, he created the Bakufu, a tent government that appointed military governors, shugo and estate stewards, jito to administer law, collect dues, and mobilize troops. This arrangement formalized the bond between the center and the warrior periphery. In 1192, Yoritomo received the title of Sei Taishogun, establishing the first shogunate. The Bakufu issued legal codes that addressed land tenure, inheritance, and vassal obligations, notably the Joi Shikimoku of 1232, under the regency of the Hojo clan. Kamakura rule did not erase local autonomy, but it regularized the practices that had made warrior families powerful. Loyalty to a lord, framed by reciprocal protection and the grant of income from rice lands, became the basic currency of politics. The 13th century brought an external threat that tested this new order. The Mongol Empire, which had conquered Korea, demanded submission. When diplomacy failed, invasions followed in 1274 and 1281. Samurai, who were trained for ritualized combat, found themselves facing massed infantry, coordinated arrow storms, and explosive projectiles. Coastal garrisons fought night raids and boarding actions from stout ships, sometimes in miserable weather. The Japanese constructed shoreline defenses, including long stone walls in Kyushu that limited landing sites. Storms famously battered the invasion fleets, and both campaigns failed. Victory had complicated effects. There was no conquest to divide as spoils, and warriors who had risked their lives expected reward. The bakufu paid stipends and recognized service, but strain accumulated. This fiscal pressure eroded the ability of Kamakura leaders to placate vassals, sowing discontent that rivals would later exploit. By the early 14th century, competing visions for rule resurfaced. Emperor Go-Daigo sought to restore direct imperial authority, mobilizing warrior support in a revolt against the Hojo regents. The Kamakura bakufu fell in 1333, but the court's brief Keimu restoration could not satisfy a warrior class that had come to expect land and offices. Ashikaga Takauji, initially a supporter of the imperial cause, turned against the court and established a new military regime, the Muromachi shogunate, in 1336. This order relied even more heavily on provincial magnates, now called shugo daimyo, who exercised military and fiscal control over vast territories. The arrangement maintained a veneer of central authority, yet power flowed through regional coalitions. The system fractured during the Onin War, a Kyoto-based conflict from 1467 to 1477 that ignited local disputes across the country and ushered in the Sengoku, the age of warring states. The Sengoku period changed the scale and methods of samurai warfare. Large coalitions fought protracted campaigns aimed at territorial consolidation rather than court influence alone. Castle construction advanced from hilltop redoubts to massive stone-walled complexes that anchored strategic road networks and river crossings. Armies combined mounted samurai with growing numbers of ashigaru, foot soldiers drawn from villages and trained to fight in disciplined spear units. Logistics became central to victory. Daimyo who mastered land surveys, taxation, road building, and river transport could supply large forces for months, an advantage that translated into battlefield success and political legitimacy. Early samurai fought primarily as mounted archers. The yumi, a tall asymmetrical bow, allowed accurate fire from horseback and gave Japanese warfare its distinctive emphasis on archery well into the medieval period. As engagements shifted toward massed formations and close assaults on fortifications, the yari spear grew in importance. Naginata, the curved-bladed polearm, remained in use among both warriors and, in some contexts, women of the warrior class who defended households in times of siege. Swords evolved from the long tachi, worn with the edge down from the belt for cavalry use, to the katana, worn with the edge up for quick draws in close combat. Armor, initially lamellar and lacquered for weather resistance, was adapted with additional plate elements for better protection against arrows and spears. Tactical manuals from later centuries codified formations, signals, and rules for coordinating infantry and cavalry, evidence of growing professionalism within samurai ranks. The moral world of the samurai did not appear fully formed. Early values emphasized personal valor, reputation, and loyalty to one's household. Over time, religious and philosophical currents shaped a more articulated ethos. Zen Buddhism emphasized mental discipline, present moment awareness, and acceptance of death, qualities that warriors found particularly useful in battle and daily training. Shinto practices tied warrior houses to local shrines and ancestral rites. During the Tokugawa-era, Neo-Confucian ideas about hierarchy, duty, and righteous governance colored samurai education. The term Bushido, the way of the warrior, became a retrospective label for these evolving norms, later codified in texts that sought to reconcile martial service with moral cultivation. While later romanticized, Bushido grew out of practical concerns, such as how to regulate violence, justify authority, and instruct a class that increasingly served as administrators as well as soldiers. The rise of the samurai also included the often overlooked role of women. Wives and daughters of warrior families managed estates, arranged alliances through marriage, and, in emergencies, defended compounds. Some, remembered as Onabu geisha, trained with the naginata and short blade. Figures like Tomo Gozen appear in medieval war tales, blending history and legend, yet even in less dramatic cases, women's economic management and social diplomacy were essential to the stability of warrior households. In later periods, moral guides emphasized chastity, frugality, and education, suitable to household governance, reflecting the administrative responsibilities that came with a stratified society. Contact with Europeans in the 16th century introduced firearms, first acquired on Tanegashima in 1543. Japanese smiths quickly mastered matchlock production, and daimyo adapted tactics to exploit volley fire behind palisades. At Nagashino in 1575, Oda Nobunaga employed ranks of arquebusiers to counter the Takeda cavalry, marking a pivotal moment in the integration of firearms into samurai warfare. Nobunaga also promoted castle towns, concentrating artisans and merchants around administrative and military hubs. His successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, pushed unification further through land surveys, the sword hunt that restricted weapons to the warrior class, and reforms that tied peasants to registered villages. These measures created a simpler and clearer class structure, with samurai defined by service and stipend rather than pure battlefield prowess. After victory at Sekigahara in 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu established a shogunate that stabilized the country. Peace changed the samurai's role. Many became castle-town officials, tax assessors, magistrates, and tutors, paid in rice stipends calculated by the kokudaka system. The alternate attendance system, sankin kotai, required daimyo to spend time in Edo, which curtailed independent war-making and fostered a nationwide administrative culture. Training shifted toward letters as well as arms. Schools taught Confucian ethics, law, and history alongside martial practice. While dueling and clan disputes did not vanish, large-scale civil war ended, and the samurai identity fused service, learning, and regulated conduct. The rise of the samurai was not a sudden leap from legend to fully formed code. It was a lengthy process driven by provincial realities, the need to safeguard land and income, and the political vacuum left by the decline of the courtly system. From mounted archers on the Heian frontier to castle administrators in the Tokugawa peace, the warrior class adapted to new weapons, new ideas, and new institutions. The Minamoto and Taira struggles created opportunities for military government. The Mongol invasions hardened defensive practices and strained finances. The Sengoku-era taught logistics and organization on a national scale, and unification molded a warrior elite into a governing estate. What we call Bushido crystallized after centuries of practice, argument, and reform. The legacy of the samurai lies in that adaptability, a capacity to reinvent the meaning of service and authority as Japan moved from a world of fragmented estates to a centralized state that prized order as much as courage. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Compact Warfare from compactwarfare.com. If you did, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.